How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is RuffledRowlit, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today, guys, we got some Pokemon leaks that might have came out, which are pretty big, actually. Pretty large leaks, I'm not even gonna lie. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started. First things first is going to be this post right here, coming to us from none else than, of course, RuffledRowlit. Now, if you do not know who RuffledRowlit is, he is a person who is an insider. He has information, and he's leaked stuff in the past, but he doesn't leak things by literally telling you stuff, except now he is. Normally, he makes riddles, right, which is where the RuffledRowlit part of his name comes in. However, he tweeted out this picture. Now, this picture is really odd, right? Really out there, really surprising. But he posts a picture of Pokemon FireRed. Oops, why did I go to Grok? What was that? He posts a picture of Pokemon FireRed and Pokemon LeafGreen, which is really strange, okay? Like, I have to really emphasize, this is really odd that he would post these, but he says they will return soon. So, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. This could imply we are going to be getting FireRed and LeafGreen returning in some way, shape, or form in this year, right? Like, we're actually going to get a version of these releasing, maybe not Virtual Console, maybe something else. Actually, there are a few responses that are connected to this, right? But it's kind of crazy to see that he returns with this post, because if we look here, he hasn't really posted much else ever since, like, the DLC dropped, like, you know, the DLC for Pokémon Legends ZA. He hasn't really posted much, and then suddenly he appears with this, which is really odd. It's really weird. Kind of unexpected, to say the least, right? It's not really something I saw coming, but yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we might get a re-release of Pokemon FireRed LeafGreen on Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, but there is somebody else, another sort of insider who's been tweeting stuff in relation to this. So, that would be Rico from Hannah Montana, which, yes, I know sounds ridiculous if I say this out of context, but this is another person who seems to be an insider. They seem to have posted stuff that is, like, you know, that has levels of legitimacy to it, but I don't know how much we can take from that and actually believe. But here's what he said, though. He actually replied to this saying paid, not NSO. NSO being Nintendo Switch Online, implying that this is going to be games you're going to have to buy separately. They're not going to be included in Nintendo Switch Online, you know, like the bundle you get. Like, not the bundle, but like when you buy Nintendo Switch Online, you get access to like the Virtual Console. I forget what it's called. But that entire feature, normally you get a bunch of classic games, a lot of like old games that way. However, he's saying that this is going to be a separate thing. You're going to have to buy these games, which, listen, it's nice in the sense of like, hey, some people that have never got to, I mean, I'll be honest with you, if you have a computer, shit, even if you have a mobile phone, you can just get an emulator and play these games. However, if you want to get like legitimate Pokemon from these games to be able to transfer to recent games, then yeah, you kind of have to own them. And then you have to do the whole process of transferring them from generation to generation all the way through Pokemon Bank and into Pokemon Home, which is in itself an entire freaking process. However, what I do want to say is that, like, if you're someone who hasn't played these games, maybe this is going to be a good way to get into it. I do wonder what they're going to actually do with it, but he says not going to be Nintendo Switch Online, which means you're going to have to buy it yourself, and apparently it's going to have home compatibility. So that's a big deal for a lot of people. I know to a lot of people, having that home compatibility is everything, right? Because otherwise, what's the point of this? If you cannot transfer Pokemon from it, then what's the actual point? You might as well just go and get the old games or just play on an emulator at that point, because it doesn't make any difference. Like, a lot of people are going to be playing this specifically to get maybe some exclusive Pokemon. It's my, you know, what do you call, my hair looks like a mess, brother. Let's just put a hat on. There we go. Either way, so like I said, basically, if you want this, it's going to be great for you if you haven't played these games yet. If you already played them and you already own the thingies, it's just going to be a quicker way to maybe get Pokemon from the, like, FireRed LeafGreen into Pokemon Home. Plus, it is FireRed LeafGreen, and they're actually pretty peak games. Like, I think, personally, FireRed LeafGreen are way better than the original Red and Blue. And I think they're also better than most of the games we have. Like, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee doesn't come close to FireRed LeafGreen, in my opinion, because FireRed LeafGreen had more content as a whole. And it was, you know, just a more complete game. It had more stuff in it. It had the stuff you expected, plus it had some Gen 3 stuff in it, too. So I think personally it's a great game, but it's really odd that they never released it before and why it's not going to be on Nintendo Switch Online. But again, if it's some kind of bundle, I'm really curious to see how much they're going to charge for it. If it's more than 15 bucks, I think it's too much, because like I said, if you have a mobile phone, if you have a phone right now, you can just grab your phone, get an emulator, and play these things like for free. If you know, like, again, it's a possibility you can do. I'm not going to tell you how, but you can just Google a little bit. My point is, I really hope they're not going to charge like 45 bucks for this. Because if they do, that's ridiculous. I genuinely think it's ridiculous. 25 bucks, I think even that is pushing it. But it is possibly the only way certain people are going to get to play it. So I guess in some way, you know, as long as people get to enjoy it, I think that's all that matters. And what's the most important. So I'll kind of leave it there on that in that regard. But yeah, we also saw Stealth sharing this. There seems to be a rumor going around that FireRed LeafGreen will be releasing on the eShop as one of the 30th anniversary announcements. All Pokemon games should be on the eShop. I think it's crazy that you can't buy Gen 1s to 7 on Switch now, which I agree, it is ridiculous. But it's funny how some people are saying it's fake. The thing is, if it was coming from anyone else than Riddler Coup, if it was coming from anyone else than him, I wouldn't really trust it. But the fact that he tweeted it, that Riddler Coup, who has been correct several times in the past, and I had like maybe 1 or 2 times where it's not, like, you know, a few times where it's like incorrect, or maybe like stuff he had heard about, maybe got, you know, scrapped along the way. It's just a little bit odd. But nonetheless, though, this is exciting. At least to me personally, this is exciting. We get to see like an old game return. Though I would prefer it if all efforts in general are always put on the next thing, right? Instead of constantly just going back to the past. However, with this, I feel like it's fine because there shouldn't be a lot of costs involved with just porting these things to the Switch. Shit, if you have a custom firmware Switch, a hacked one, you can just run these on there already using emulators. So it's not like it's impossible or difficult for them to pull off. It should be relatively easy and pretty cost efficient, to say the least. So we'll see how that turns out when we come around to it, and hopefully this will be announced. Also though, on top of that, Rico said that there is another thing that's coming out. He said day 1 Nintendo Switch Online and Nintendo Switch 2 only, which is interesting. So NSO, he's saying that we're going to be seeing, I guess, Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, which I know Stadium and stuff were coming out, but wasn't Colosseum already announced, or am I crazy? Because I don't remember anymore. Like, I don't remember what's on Nintendo Switch Online, like on their like whole, you know, like that whole like service, because I don't pay for Nintendo Switch Online. I don't really use it. I think it's kind of a stupid thing to spend money on, but nonetheless, this is exciting, I guess, because Gale of Darkness and especially Colosseum and Gale of Darkness are 2 games that are, generally speaking, pretty freaking hard to get your hands on, okay? They're pretty freaking hard to get your hands on if you want to get the actual physical copies, because they're not really being sold anymore. Like, the ability to actually get your hands on these games is becoming harder and harder by the day. Which I guess is only kind of natural that it was going to be like, that was going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, it was only a matter of time before you would get to that point where, you know, people are going to be struggling to buy because it's too expensive and there's not enough like quantity of them out there, because not a lot of people bought these games back in the day. Like, people like to pretend like these games are absolute cinema and everybody played them and whatever, but realistically, the amount of people that actually played XD Gale of Darkness as well as Colosseum, I think we can actually look this up. I think we just did a little bit of Googling. How many copies did XD Gale of Darkness sell? So Gale of Darkness sold about 1.4 million copies. Think about that, 1.4 million, as opposed to really any other mainline Pokemon game. That is nothing. That's like barely 10% of the sales of, like, you know, even Legends ZA. So the amount of people who have actually played this is very low, which is why it's going to be exciting to see this return. I think this is a good thing. It's great. And if it's part of the Nintendo Switch Online, like Rico here is implying, that's perfect, because if they're going to charge for FireRed LeafGreen, I'm happy they're not going to charge at least for this. And this way, more people get to experience these games, which they never got to experience in the past. So I'm very excited for that. In that regard, I'm very happy to see that that's going to be coming back. And honestly, it might be something I might actually stream, because I've been needing something to do like streams for, so it might be worth it. However, let's now move over to a 4chan rumor, baby. You know how this is. So first of all, there's a picture of a tree, like a hollowed out tree. And then the person says, Pokemon Wind and Wave by Anonymous. And sorry if the text is a bit cut off here, fellas. I do apologize. I'll try to move it to the sides. You guys can see it a little bit better if you want to read it yourself. But here's what it says, though. Pokemon Wind and Wave, November 19th, 2026. Now, November 19th, if you look at the calendar real quick, November 19th lands on a Thursday, which is about right when you would expect a Pokemon game release. That's usually around when it lands, so nothing too crazy there. That sounds about right, is what I'm going to say. Sounds about right. But we'll see how that goes. Also, speaking of that, by the way, so Gale of Darkness re-release, Nintendo Switch Online release, and then Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive release apparently as well. I don't know what he means by that. We're going to see how that turns out. But either way, back to the point. We arrive in Danawi, the main capital city in the Serica region. Serica, really. And we're invited by a tour company called Toriko that also manages a resort over at the Turba Island. Our tour guide is called Professor Areka. His main job is a tour guide, but also likes to document nature as a side job. Toriko package gives you a Roto at a special backpack. Lets you use any Pokemon throughout the region, similar to Synchro Machine. That would be sick, okay? Listen, any form of Synchro Machine returning would be absolute cinema. Please, if you don't know what the Synchro Machine is, by the way, if you never played the second DLC of Scarlet and Violet, the Blueberry Academy, that one, if you never played that DLC, for the love of God, you really should try it out if it's discounted or something like that, like later down the line, if you can get the bundle for cheap or some shit, if you haven't played it, because I think that one feature is honestly worth the admission on its own, which I know is a small thing, but the fact that in that version you can essentially control the Pokemon, like you use this Synchro Machine, right, which allows you to literally play as the Pokemon. You literally walk around and embody the Pokemon itself, which is such a cool feature, and I don't know why they haven't committed to it, because clearly they could do it in that DLC. They were able to make all those Pokemon, every Pokemon from Scarlet and Violet, every single one was able to be essentially controlled. So what is stopping them from doing something like that here too? Like, this just feels like the obvious direction they should go and make a feature like this in every game. I don't know why they don't do it, man, because they already did it. Just reuse that same stuff, because we already know the Pokemon games are always built upon previous versions of other Pokemon games. Like, if you look at the actual files of Sword and Shield, for example, you'll see that it was built on a fork version of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and the same thing goes for Scarlet and Violet and those games. Actually, I think it's Legend, so it's, I think, BDSP, but then Legends Arceus, right? So Legends Arceus is built on a version of Sword and Shield, and then Scarlet Violet is built on a version of Legends Arceus. Like, they all kind of use the previous game as a basis, right? They use a version of those. They even reuse models to test out, like, during the testing phase and stuff, and they always make upgrades, of course, obviously. They have to make upgrades to the engine and stuff like that. However, they can easily bring this back. At least I think so, based on the fact that they often do reuse existing stuff from the past. So I don't see what would stop them doing it here. Unless, of course, the entire architecture of their engine is changing, or the entire architecture of this game is made in such a way that they can't do it, which is always a possibility, okay? There's always a chance that's the case, but you never know. But I would love that, man. So the player gets attached to the back, basically following the Pokemon. So we already know that this is supposed to be some kind of feature, though, where we, not being attached to the Pokemon on the back, but that we are sort of riding like almost like a jet ski type thing behind our Pokemon, or like a sleigh. Like, we're being like, you know, we're riding a sleigh while the Pokemon's like essentially like Rudolph. Something like that is what we've seen, but who knows if that might change by the actual release. So basically following the Pokemon, okay, so a woman from a village in a nearby island can hear the whispers of the legendary Pokemon. Her name is Sharon, basically a co-mentor alongside Areka, like Clavel and Jack, okay? Main rival is called Angeli. She lives at the Turbo Island, and she knows most of Serica. After getting starters, not spoiling that lol, you'll meet, well, why would you, you're already leaking stuff. You'll meet a wild and weak Charizard. Basically, it will be the introduction to the game's main gimmick. Okay, Backpack has a crafting menu, has some fun GBA-like music. That actually sounds nice. Seamless battling like ZA is in it, unfortunately is still turn-based. Well, that is good, though, that it's, like, still seamless. The turn-based part, I wouldn't mind, again, the action-type combat, if it's just improved. I think ZA kind of dipped its toes, but it never really fully committed to it. So I do hope that they sort of bring that back in the future, that, you know, action combat, but commit to it, make it better, improve it as much as possible, make it more fluid, and not as sort of stilted at times. However, turn-based being back is going to make a lot of people happy. We already know turn-based is coming back based on the leaks, but it is what it is. Now, there's Pokemon that can chase you down, which I thought was cool. Head of the resort subsidiary of Toriko is a man in the wind version and a woman in the wave version, okay? They're widows, and their husband and wife is implied to have been killed by a Pokemon. They're the main antagonists. All right. Interesting. They have a son called Ralph, which is one of the rivals. Looks pretty emo. All right, well, that's one way to put it. Toby Fox will not be returning for the OST. Okay. Pikachu looks like the same as the redesigns from the leaks, albeit with smaller eyes. Gimmick basically gives you the ability to use similar moves like the Rogue Megas in ZA. Really chaotic when in free roam multiplayer raids, trying to dodge them. Voice acting was incomplete, so Angeli had the voice of a Japanese man. Lol. Okay. That sounds a bit random, but all right. That's such a random thing to say. I mean, what version of the game are you looking at if this is a real leak, right? What version are you actually taking a look at? Because wouldn't that change? Like, if it's an early version, then yeah, that's not the final voice. So, you know, who cares? But either way, Nonetheless, though, that is pretty much that rumor. And at the end of the day, this is just a 4chan rumor. The first thing we talked about, the FireRed LeafGreen thing, most likely real. Okay, very, very, very high chance that that is actually real. However, this, I don't know as much though, man. Like, this does feel a little bit, you know, just like average 4chan rumor type shit, which is fine. It's not the end of the world. But I would love to know your guys' thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. And thank you for watching. I'll be seeing you all in the next video. Peace out and bye-bye, ladies and gentlemen.